Welcome to another presentation from the CV Academics Foundation, home of the AMP Honors Program.
All right, welcome everyone from the AMP Honors Program. Today I am very happy to introduce Dr. Merkel. He's a professor of immunology and microbiology at UW Green Bay. And we're just going to be going through a couple of questions for him today. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been interested in public health for about 36 years. Part of my interest in that is through personal experience. I hadn't been feeling well, but I attributed that to, not being in sports. I'd done a lot of different kinds of sports throughout high school. And so when you're 18, you're immortal. That was a Friday. That Sunday, I was in the local hospital going through chemotherapy with a very uncertain future, let alone the leukemia that I had. But the hematologist told us that if we didn't go through, if we could find a donor, number one, but actually go through that, my chances of long-term survival were very slim. So long story short, I went to Seattle, Washington, was an inpatient for 4 months, a lot of complications. I lived a lot of microbiology and immunology. And that was the start of it. So that was just over 36 years ago. So ever since, I've been really fascinated with all things microbiology and immunology. And I'm also, whatever I can do to help students get into med school, because at the end of the day, I am a living, breathing, walking testament to the value of science and medicine.
Okay, so your interests and all that stuff really came from a personal experience. It wasn't something you weren't reading it, you were living immunology, you were living all of the medical stuff, which extrapolated to where you are now.
Yeah, I was NPO for 60 days, a lot of graft versus host disease. How does the immune system learn new tricks? All of a sudden, despite all this acute graft versus host disease, it, just fortunately was able to survive a lot of that. That was rough. But that was it, so I was a biology major in college, but I was really on that path. And then I always say that teaching found me. So when I went off to graduate school, I love doing research, I really did, but it was really the first presentation opportunity that I had in graduate school. And that was it. I just, being able to be given an opportunity to communicate science and explain how it works. And I really like, things that complex systems and really trying to explain a way that would work for people of all different types of backgrounds really just became a huge passion of mine. Because the more people we turn on to science and keep them turned on to science, the more discoveries are going to be, the more doctors we're going to have, and the rest of it. So these are all the things that drive me, for good or for ill, as I say, hopefully.
It's you, whether it's good or bad.
That's right.
I always say that you get all of me or you get none of me.
That's right.
So what was your PhD work in? Like, what was your specific PhD project, or just like an overview of it?
So I ended up working for, in Dr. Kathy McCoy's lab at the Medical College of Virginia. I became, very interested in antigen presentation pathways and how it works and what does it take to activate T cells. But ultimately, it's about making sure that when there's a need to activate T cells, that they get activated. But those pathways also play a role in educating T cells too, so that they don't respond to things that we don't want them to respond to. But that really was the specific area that I was focused or had an interest in as a PhD student. And then I did what I call a teaching postdoc. So, I really always had this big love for teaching, and I wanted to be, the best teacher I could be.
And I can say firsthand, you talk about your enjoyment for teaching. My first semester at Green Bay, when I transferred from Kenosha, I went to Parkside. I had you for your microbiology. And that was at a turning point when I didn't know what was going on with my education. I was learning how to learn at that point. And your class was so daunting that first exam. I remember I was nervous and I didn't do so well. But you said trust the process. And you said, and I really loved that microbiology class. It really kickstarted everything and got me to where I am today.
It's really important, I think, for students to understand that it is a relationship at the end of the day, and I get it. I was just kind of a shy student. I felt like it was really up to me to figure everything out. I just really didn't have a lot of good roadmaps. That's how I think about these things now. Roadmaps for how do I get from point A to point B? What is the role of a student really versus the role of a faculty member?
So what is a career, if you were to explain to a high school student or someone that's probably watching this, most likely a high school or even just beginning college, what is a career of someone who specializes in either immunology or is a professor of immunology teaching life? Can you explain maybe a day in the life of either?
I used to joke that, hey, I'm someone that's got a lot of limitations. I'm just grateful that I've fallen into this great fit career for me that I absolutely love. Both of my parents hated their jobs. And I thought, well, I'm going to go off to college and find something I can tolerate. That's being successful because my parents hate their jobs. And I'll find happiness with my hobbies and my personal relationships. That's how I thought life worked. That was my vision back in the day. So to your point, it kind of comes full circle. What is a day in the life for me then? Because there's not a day that doesn't go by I don't think about my parents, what they went through, how off I was with how I thought life could be. So I have a lot of autonomy. I teach classes in immunology, as you know, right? Advanced microbiology, and the content is always changing. COVID-19, unfortunately, is really helping me a great deal these days, showcase the relevance of not just microbiology, but immunology as well. There's always new information to look at to make sure that your material is always up to date. I get to work with students and do research with them too. It's not just about what you're doing in a classroom. It's the conversations that you have with students to try to help them avoid some of your own pitfalls. It just thrills me to death because, the opportunities never end. For someone that's gone through everything I did, with my own health history, it's, well, how many different ways can I try to pay it forward? Well, it's what I do in the classroom, conversations I have outside of the classroom. Now I have this privilege of working with medical students directly. I bring that back into the classroom for undergraduates at UW Green Bay. We have 3 areas of contribution: teaching, research, and service. COVID-19 has taught us, well, I'd like to think it's taught us so many lessons. But one of the things I'd like to think it's teaching us is what happens when we don't work well together. Because COVID-19, it has its own agenda. And the reality is when you're dealing with something like COVID-19 and you cannot work in a team construct effectively in a team way, it's really going to make you pay. And I think that's been part of the history of COVID-19 that we've seen.
Funny how relevant, especially, obviously you've been passionate and felt the importance of immunology and microbiology for the last 30 plus years. You've known the importance, but most of society, until you give a relevance or why it's important, they don't see it because it's not a immediate danger. But COVID has really sparked everything. You went from people's least interest in the public because they don't care, they're science, whatever, they're all science people. All of a sudden, you're up here now. You're supposed to be who they look to for guidance and information to follow, and you're supposed to be up here, but some people are going against that. Is maybe one of your least favorite parts of what you do?
It came up yesterday when I got my haircut. The person that came in expressed that they're not going to get vaccinated. I really don't get too much into the I'm here to persuade you game. It's more of inviting them to have a conversation. And my experience is there's a lot of good questions out there. And when those questions go unanswered, there's more engaging of the internet and social media. And if science is not accessible, where we talk about misconceptions, what is a double-blind study? Why is there value to that? How are vaccines made? When you have those conversations with people, they should be reassuring. But if you don't take the time as a physician, for example, we're living in a time now which we can't have that. That can't be. We have to communicate what we know. And there's a way to doing that too. And, I do the best I can. I'm not here to tell you all the reasons why you're wrong. I'm here to listen to the concerns you have. I'm here to listen to the questions you have. And I'm going to tell you the science that addresses these things. And what I have found in doing that is, I think more often than not, I do get a positive response from the people that I talk to. Influenza vaccine, you can have symptoms for up to 2 weeks after you get it, right? Why wouldn't someone think the vaccine gave them the infection? But again, if we're not communicating that, and if we don't invest in public health, which there's been a real erosion of support for public health, then you get what you get sometimes, So those are all passions of mine, because I really do see the value of people working together. And I think so often what really drives me is I'm convinced sometimes it's just having a conversation can dramatically change things.
And as an educator, it's all coming out and it's awesome. And one of the key takeaways I've had from you is you always said, stay in your lane.
I mean what I say. If you want a home built, you don't want me. If you need to have thoracic surgery, clearly, right, it would kill you. You don't want me. So there is something to be said for expertise. There's no question about it. There's also something to be said for critical thinking skills. Okay, yes, I am talking to an immunologist, but I'm not just going to take verbatim what you say. I will ask critical questions. I'm going to ask questions of you. And it's critical, because whether we like it or not, we live in a global society, right? And there's no physical wall that's going to prevent viruses that don't have borders from getting around, right? Viruses don't have borders. And if that's true, which it is, what does that mean then? How do we approach that reality? But ultimately, my role is I want to inform people so they can make better choices, hopefully, with the information that they have.
All right. So then in closing, is there anything else you want to add or share with the A&P Honors Program students? And do you have any words of wisdom or words of advice or key takeaways?
Seek out mentor relationships. It's really important. A lot of it is, and you kind of picked up on it, right? You said these are the things. Don't do as I did. Be better. But it's true. I think mentor relationships can be really helpful for people of all ages, and roadmaps are really helpful. Can anyone get into medical school without a roadmap? Is that possible? Absolutely. But when you go to a graduation ceremony like I did, if I remember correctly, the vast majority, perhaps every single one, had a family member that was a physician. What does that tell you? What that tells you is that having that guidance, a roadmap, especially for programs that are extremely difficult to get into. Just realize that there are roadmaps out there and be looking for them, and mentors can really be helpful that way to try to help you develop the roadmap to help you connect the dots. So many people can do much more. I think my experience is much more than they set out for themselves. Reach for the moon. What worst case scenario? You'll land on the stars.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do the interview. Hope you have a great day.
This has been a presentation of the CV Academics Foundation, home of the AMP Honors Program.